So, a new Lord of the Rings movie has just been announced, and supposedly Peter Jackson and his team are taking back up the reins according to Warner Brothers. The movie's set to come out in 2026, and I wanted to hop on here to address a few comments and concerns that I saw while making a community post on the channel, and you might have even seen I already made a YouTube short announcing this. But just to give a little backstory, today, May 9th, it came out that Warner Brothers was producing a new Lord of the Rings movie, which we should really be calling a Middle-earth Tolkien lore movie, because Lord of the Rings is not being replaced. The original trilogy is not being remade. This is rather an addition based on the actual Tolkien lore that is mentioned in the Lord of the Rings books and in the Hobbit book. And this first film is going to be called, at least the working title is, The Hunt for Gollum. Essentially, this is going to be a movie that is addressing the in-between period of The Hobbit and The Fellowship of the Ring, when Gandalf and Aragorn are trying to hunt down Gollum and confirm whether or not Bilbo actually got the One Ring of Sauron. Because at the time, they don't know if it's just a magic ring or actually the One Ring. So that being said, when I made a community post, I actually expected a lot more people to be excited about this. And I wanted to come out here and make an official video stating that I think this is going to be a great film, and I'm going to list a few reasons why. Now, I'm not only optimistic because, you know, I'm a Tolkien YouTuber and I need to be nice about these things, but I'm actually optimistic because the original team is involved. Yes, it is Warner Brothers. It isn't New Line Cinema that produced the first Lord of the Rings trilogy with Peter Jackson, but we have all the other same players. We have Peter Jackson, Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, and Andy Serkis directing, of which he's proven himself time and time again, directing other amazing films and acting and being in other films, really leveling up his career. And of course, if this movie is a Gollum movie, we know that Andy Serkis is going to be portraying Gollum once again, which is something that is always exciting, as even in the Hobbit trilogy, which not many people enjoy, Gollum is one of the best parts of that, as Andy Serkis plays him with Martin Freeman in those scenes. So that being said, not only are Peter Jackson and his crew involved, but in a post that Andy Serkis made on Instagram, he posted when this was announced through other sources as well, and he tagged Weta Workshops in there. Now, they have had involvement on some other things, but they were really involved, majorly involved, as Peter Jackson's own company in the Lord of the Rings trilogy that was made over 20 years ago. And that is one of the reasons why those films were so amazing, because Weta went and did all of the practical effects. They did all of the costumes, the masks, set design, everything like that. And they really took the reins, and through Peter Jackson's direction, which he'll be doing again in this new film, they made everything look so realistic. So there's that. We've got the original team. We've got Peter Jackson, Andy Serkis, Philippa, Fran writing the script, as well as a couple writers from the War of the Rohirrim, which we have yet to see, which is the animated film that's coming out at the end of this year, supposedly. But now we also know that we have Weta involved, and hopefully they'll learn from the Hobbit trilogy and go back to the more practical effects that they did with the original Lord of the Rings. Another thing I want to mention is that Mike DeLuca, who is the co-chair and CEO of Warner Brothers now, 20 years ago actually was one of the executives at New Line Cinema that signed Peter Jackson and Fran to make the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So unlike the previous guy, who we shall not name, who forced Peter Jackson to do a bunch of weird things in The Hobbit, like a dwarf-elf love triangle and all that, he is no longer there. Now we actually have a true Tolkien fan who's been with Peter since the beginning, since the first trilogy, and I'm sure that he'll give the creative reins over to Peter for this. Now, as mentioned by Nerd of the Rings and theonering.net, they talked a lot in a live stream today about how Peter Jackson has grown quite a bit. He sold Weta for like $1 billion or something like that. He's won many awards. He won 17 Oscars with The Lord of the Rings, and I believe he's gone on to win Emmys and other things as well through his new Beatles work that he's done that has just come out. And he really has nothing to prove. He's very passionate about Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. We already know this. So is Philippa and Fran, who are helping to write this. And he no longer really has the need to be under the control of even a Warner Brothers. He's sort of in a position where he can look at them and say, hey guys, I'm going to do what I want to do producing this, and let Andy do what he wants to do directing it. And you can't really tell us to add all of these crazy things. Also, although it hasn't officially been announced, I do believe that this will be filmed in New Zealand. We know with the Hobbit trilogy, a lot of it was filmed on green screens, like a lot of it was filmed on green screens. And that was in LA, in London, some in New Zealand. and there wasn't really many practical set going on with actual nature and being out like they did in the Lord of the Rings films that made them so magical. So there's still a lot of hope that they'll go back to New Zealand and film a lot of these in-person shots in the nature through this journey that Aragorn takes to get Gollum. The last thing I'll mention, based on some comments that I got on my YouTube post that I made earlier, which by the way, if you haven't gone to vote on that poll or get involved in the community, go check it out and let me know your thoughts, as well as comment them below this video. I believe that a lot of people are correlating Rings of Power with Peter Jackson's work. And I just want to remind people that Peter Jackson, Warner Brothers, their team, everybody there who was involved in the original Lord of the Rings trilogy and even The Hobbit, they have no part in the Rings of Power. Rings of Power is Amazon. It's a totally different studio, totally different writers, and they do have the rights to the same rights that Warner Brothers has, so they can use information given in The Lord of the Rings as well as The Hobbit. However, they can't use the Silmarillion, just like Warner Brothers can't use the Silmarillion or other Tolkien sources that the Tolkien estate still has, and therefore Rings of Power has kind of gone off the deep end trying to fill in gaps by just making things up, since they can't use the actual lore from Tolkien without the rights. They're a totally different group of people, so just keep that in mind. I saw a lot of comments of people saying, you know, after Rings of Power and all this other stuff, you know, I have no hope for this new film. Remember, Peter Jackson and his team are a totally different group of people than Rings of Power, and I'm sure if you really sat down with Peter and talked to him about it, he probably doesn't even like Rings of Power. Of course, he's not going to say that because he wants to be supportive, but I'm sure that he and Fran and Philippa look at it and are like, hey, we need to take back the reins and do this ourselves again. All of that being said, I'm sorry for this rant, but this was kind of breaking news. I wanted to get out here, record my thoughts, put it out there, and let you all know that I'm excited and I have high hopes for this new Hunt for Gollum, or whatever they're going to end up calling it, and I'll keep you updated over the next couple years as this is set to come out.